MNF podcast. Yes, different t-shirts, different environments, different faces, same faces actually, familiar places. We are here today for another episode of fire content, mechanical watches, random tangents, and diss tracks to specific people. Actually, we'll keep it anonymous, but a certain YouTube user that commented on Milo's video, just know because we will meet at some point in real life, you will get mogged. You won't be physically or mentally abused, but you will get mogged, and you'll know when you get mogged, and we will know when you know that you got mogged by the look in your eyes, because the mog train is coming to town. So when we see you, it is on site, and by on site I mean we'll say hello, we'll mog you without telling you we're mogging you. We'll get the satisfaction of mogging you, and then we'll be on our merry way to continue our sad lives here in the UK. 3rd of August, 14 degrees and rain, because this is how we do it. This is how we do it.
I'd like to point out that this user was actually anonymous, but because I have so many contacts in this industry, I was able to find out who this was. So you're not safe. If you're talking shit behind the screen right now, I know where you live. We coming.
We're
Except we're not.
coming.
Except we're not
Except,
coming at all.
yeah. Okay.
And when you see that person in person, IRL, in real life, guess what? As they say, upper body blows his away. Right?
Yeah.
It's gonna be mogging o'clock. Enjoy.
Logging o'clock and a random barbell that we will be carrying with us. They're the best. I think one of the nicest mogs you can do. There are two. I think one is when somebody's deadlifting and they're struggling, where you go and just grip and rip the bar, or cleaning badly and pressing the bar over your head. So let's say somebody's doing rows with like 60 to 80 kilos. You grab it, clean it, and then do like 5 or more reps of strict pressing to mog them.
When I hear grip and rip, I prefer to think of gripping the bar to deadlift it and then aggressively shitting myself.
Yeah, that's what I
But
meant as well.
to each their own, chief.
Men of culture, welcome
Indeed.
to Muscle and Feels Cigar and Shitting Yourself Club. Light one up and take a shit at that stage of edginess. Yeah, guys, this is not, this is the type of podcast you've signed up for. If you want to be serious and learn stuff, go somewhere else. Just kidding,
Hey,
though, because
5-hour aspartame conversation.
that was a top episode, though. I haven't finished all
Haven't
of it.
listened to it, lol.
I haven't
Because it's
finished
5
all
hours.
of it, but I am.
I'm sure it's
Uh,
fire. Their shit is always fire, but if it's 5 hours, it's kind of long. You feel me?
It's kind of long, but they do a nice deep dive in the history of artificial sweeteners and why people are so skeptical about artificial sweeteners. And they have somewhat of a right to be skeptical when you know the history and you're like, oh, actually, some shady stuff behind artificial sweeteners and how they were introduced to the world. But
Wow. So you don't just get a history lesson; you also get a melatonin effect.
yes, it's
Very cool.
I was driving while listening to it. I was an absolute savage on the road. No hands, no eyes, just gas.
Do you do cardio with no hands too?
Yes, because I don't do cardio.
Smart.
Okay,
Anyways, Pat, what's the fucking topic of conversation today?
the fucking topic, cool friend Milo, we're out here slanging crack, is feedback on resistance training performance and adaptations, a systematic review and meta-analysis by the good researcher. I'm not sure if it's a good doctor. I assume maybe they are. Jonathan, not to be confused with his alter ego and arch nemesis, Jonathan. Jonathan Weekly. Why are you called Weekly, my brother?
It's very sad because it's not even weekly as in like every week. It's week spelled like being weak. And it's quite a name, isn't it? Jonathan Weekly.
Yeah. Imagine
Also,
if you're
holy shit. Author number 4 is called Dale B. Red or
be
Dale
ready.
Bread. Hey, he get money, you feel me?
The names are somewhat auto-generated. Besides the good doctor,
This paper is definitely fake.
this
Let's be
AI,
honest.
except Brad Schoenfeld's name. So they either copied it and added it there, or the AI model they used was like, okay, yeah, this is a famous name. Let's throw that in there as well. But You've got Jonathan Weekly, shout out. I mean, imagine you're a sports scientist and you're not on the jacked side of things and you write about resistance training. You already have the freaks from the Train Hard camp criticizing you, even if you're like, we are hearing that we don't lift and we're out there being pencil necks, deadlifting well in the 600 in the 600 club and pressing a bunch of stuff and being 220 plus pounds. And then imagine you show up and you're not 220 plus pounds, a researcher and called Weekly. The bros will have a
It's so
blast.
over. It's so over. I was gonna say Brad Schoenfeld is kind of like God. Omniscient, knows everything, and omnipresent as well. Name a paper that you've read over the past 5 years where Brad hasn't been involved. You feel me?
Yes, that is
He's
true.
prolific. He's prolific.
That is true. And I did find Dr. Jonathan. He is a good doctor. Big shout out to him. And I'm just checking his socials to see. Very handsome fella.
Let's
Looks
see the
like he
physique.
lifts.
Let's see the physique. Okay, very very handsome indeed. God damn.
Yes.
See
Shout
some
out
for the
to
rest of us.
Jonathan. And looks like he's, let's see, let's check the H index. I think he's mocking us there. 28 H index. Goodbye. 1,800 citations.
Okay,
Absolutely
if you go
killing it.
on his X or Twitter, as I would call it, you can see his cover picture, and it's just a
Yeah,
picture
you
of
can
his
see the
ass.
booty.
Why is there a picture of his booty?
Off the
It's
booty.
his booty speaking into a room full of listeners, and it's a bit confusing.
That's fine though, because he does look like a guy that lifts. So let's see, there's a picture, a full
He made
body
it.
picture. Yeah. Absolute beast. He managed to save his actual name. But no, joking aside, shout out to the good doctor, Jonathan Weekly, for this awesome paper. And shout out to the rest of the team. And yeah, okay. So this is
He got his
what's up?
PhD in the motherland. He got it in the UK. He got it
Yeah, Leeds
made.
Beckett.
Indeed, fire.
Shout out to Leeds Beckett.
Hey, shout out to HMRC.
Shout out to the gang at Leeds.
Indeed. It's on site or something. I don't know. We're
Which
just
not
running
on
out of
site.
things now. Indeed.
Yeah,
It's all
okay.
friendship.
So the paper that we're reviewing is a really cool paper called "The Effect of Feedback on Resistance Training Performance and Adaptations and a Systematic Review and Meta-Analysis." So just to actually quote the paper itself in terms of its background is what the authors have written as far as background goes is that feedback is often used during resistance training to enhance acute physical performance and has shown promise as a method of improving chronic physical adaptation. However, there are inconsistencies in the scientific literature regarding the magnitude of the acute and chronic responses to feedback and the optimal method with which it is provided. Super cool paper. This is something that has direct implications for our line of work. So, as coaches, we do provide plenty of feedback to a lot of people that we work with. Now, obviously, that type of feedback is somewhat different to what you'd see in a commercial gym facility when working with a PT. But exercise feedback is, and more specifically in resistance training, is something that we've grown up with and have also anecdotally used quite a bit, especially in our earlier days with the "oh you bro" and "let's go bro, one more, let's get it king, you got this" sort of fuckery that we were involved in.
Hey, my favorite form of feedback is just telling someone looked shit between every rep, so that then they have adversity, they got something to rise up against. They
That
said you
sometimes
couldn't do
works.
it.
Truly
Honestly,
evidence based.
this is the feedback that is the worst in the gym. Is when you're doing a set and someone like cracks a joke or shits in your face or something, and you just crack up during a set. It's actually impossible for harder exercises. Like I'm not sure if
Yeah,
you've
for
ever
sure.
had to laugh in a set of squats, but like your mind is not in it afterwards anymore.
That is true. But equally, anecdotally, when somebody says easy when you're warming up for a deadlift max out and the warm-ups are not moving that well and you're like, it's a shit day, I'm not gonna get a PR today, and you're supposed to work up to like a 270 260 single, let's say, and you're doing 220 that is supposed to be feeling super light, and you do it and you're like, that felt horrible and moved slow, and there's some random person they're going easy and you're like,
Hey, that's great too. What I will say though, and this is something we've been using in our own training, right? The best form of feedback is just shouting beast, 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 beast as someone warms up. It has
So
in fact been shown to increase bench press strength by something like 300%. It's confirmed.
it's
There's a
confirmed.
YouTube video. Where
Yeah.
go on, I'll let you take it.
So if you YouTube bench record fail, and I literally click on the first video titled "Man attempts 725-pound world record bench press." This is some dude at some celebration, traditional celebration. I'm not sure about the background. Anyways, some dude that looks like your average American football player. That says he's about to attempt a 725-pound bench completely raw. Like, I don't think he's even wearing, maybe he's only wearing wrist straps, not even wearing a t shirt, no shoes. And you can see as the guy's warming up, he warms up with 405, so 4 plates, with a spot, barely gets one rep with a guy literally lifting the bar off him, and he doesn't get
Don't
the second
forget
rep.
the face paint. He has face
Yeah, yeah.
paint on.
And then he shows up with face paint. There's an announcement like, okay, guys, you see these bench press records and the people that do them wear a suit and this helps them. He is about to attempt this completely raw. There's a guy there hyping him up, and it's all like there's a couple of guys in the corner, and they look like what you'd expect a comedy sort of TV show of two failed drug dealers to look like.
They look like poverty Guy Fieri's with like brown hair a little bit.
Yeah, I think that one guy is wearing a durag or a hat, and they start shouting,
It's Ali
"Beast!"
G, basically. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Beast, beast, beast. The guy they help, he's unable to unrack for 725 pounds, clearly, because
Yeah.
he was barely able to make 405, if that. And as he unracks it, the bar, he's not able to control the bar, so the bar just slams on his chest. They put it back. Super dangerous, by the way. Like, the spotters are some dudes.
Yeah.
They're pretty jacked, to be fair.
It's funny because the spotter who helped him unrack looks more jacked than the guy benching.
That's true.
Like,
And then they
give him a
go,
shot.
he's going to try again, guys. And then the guys on the side keep shouting, "Beast, beast, beast." And then the second attempt is even sadder and even more dangerous and cringe to look at. And I wouldn't be surprised if the guy actually got seriously hurt.
Hey, if you're an OG, you might remember that when Omar Isuf had a bench press accident back in the day with like a
Where the
reverse
bar
band.
slipped.
Yeah, where the bar slipped, I think, with a reverse band or something. He had like 315 or more on there, and it slammed into his chest, and he like broke his sternum or something.
Was he suicide gripping it?
I don't remember. I just remember him getting the bar slamming into his chest, and he like broke his sternum or something like that. Maybe I'm spreading misinformation, but hey, I can imagine that with about 2 to 3 times that weight, that the guy was not doing well despite being a beast.
And some of the comments, sorry, and then we'll get back into it. But this is what you've tuned in for. It says, almost dies instantly as soon as the weight is removed from the rack. You still got another rep in you, man. He would have gone in on the third try. It looked like he was about to unleash the fucking fury, and then they just stopped it. Damn, he was so close. He definitely would have gotten it if it wasn't 725 pounds. He would have had it if they had tried it a third time. Bro, it was and it's extreme how people around him go, yeah, good idea. Let's, because like it's not 300 pounds where, yeah, for a normie it's a lot of weight, but like you got a couple of people there, that's a weight they can grab. It's 725 pounds. Like, that's not even goals deadlift wise. Like, if I ever got to, it's 330 kilos.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah, man. It's also the fact that he fucking jumped from 405, so 180, straight to
Which he
725.
missed.
Yeah, straight to 725. That's a 300 plus pound jump on the bench. Like that's nasty.
That's balls right there, bro. I don't know what you're doing with your life.
respect
So, want to give us a very brief methodological introduction on the paper, or shall we just jump straight into the results?
I think we should start a meme review instead, where we just
Sure.
take random memes from Instagram and rate the meme.
TLDR, feedback was good. Different types of feedback were better than others. Thank you. Go read the paper. Favorite meme?
No, actually. So they conducted a meta-analysis on the effects of feedback during resistance training on 2 types of outcomes. Those were acute outcomes, like performance during a training session, and performance outcomes like chronic improvements in jump height and in sprint speed specifically, because there weren't enough muscle growth or strength outcomes to be analyzed. So for chronic outcomes, they focused on sprint speed and on jump height. But essentially, they look at
Another
go for it.
sorry, another chance to tell Max Coleman from the Applied Muscle Development Lab to do better and do more studies. Max, there's clearly need for literature here. After your failed deload study with only 50 people, why aren't you um, polluting the literature with more papers on feedback?
Very true.
FFS.
Very true. FFS, aka for fuck's sake. So we had 20 studies. 13 of these looked at acute outcomes, like performance within a session, where 7 of them also looked at chronic effects of feedback. So, for example, one group would get no feedback between reps, like they would just do a set and then leave the gym, whereas the other group would get feedback between each rep. That could be something, for example, like showing the velocity of a given rep. Like, for example, when they're squatting, you can set up a screen in front of them which measures bar velocity or how quickly they were able to move the bar during the lifting phase. And so they would get feedback on their performance between each rep or between each set or in some form. And that could be verbally, like someone telling them, hey, that looks shit, or hey, that looked good, or what have you. Or even visually, like, for example, visual feedback on bar velocity or anything like that, right? Interestingly, I think that visual feedback could technically encompass something like a mirror, right? Where technically, when you're looking at yourself in the mirror lifting, that would be visual feedback because you can see bar velocity to an extent, you can see how you're moving. It does constitute feedback of a visual type, so it's interesting to note. So they had 20 studies, 13 on chronic outcomes and 13 on acute outcomes like performance, and 7 on improvements in performance, specifically sprints and jumps. What they found essentially was that feedback did indeed improve acute performance and also improved adaptations in sprint and jump performance. Now, the effects were largest for
And
acute
strength.
performance and strength. Now, the effects of feedback for acute performance were largest when feedback was visual as opposed to verbal. So essentially, when people were shown, for example, their bar velocity, there were greater improvements in performance within a session than if they were just told, looked easy or keep going or what have you. Specifically, how you can interpret this is, for example, if you're doing a set of 10 on squats, you may find that you have a lower RPE for that set if you're receiving feedback between reps on how fast each rep moves visually versus if someone told you that moved fast or didn't move fast or what have you. So quantitative especially and visual feedback is better than generally, it seems, verbal feedback. This effect was significant for most things, like whether you were talking about upper body or lower body stuff, although effect sizes were generally larger in the lower body, which kind of makes sense to me because lower body training is a bit harder. At least that's how I kind of think of it. The effect sizes were generally relatively large. So when we're talking about supplement use, like for example citrulline or caffeine even, we're talking about effect sizes that for citrulline, for example, as we discussed in the last episode, it's about like 0.2 if you're talking about Hedges G. Whereas in this case, when you just look at all feedback and all performance outcomes, we're talking about 0.63. So we're going from a sort of trivial effect size to what's considered a moderate to large effect size. And that was actually even larger when we're talking about visual feedback specifically, which was more so in the neighborhood of about an effect size of 1.1. So that's a very large effect size. And that would correspond to an increase of, for the nerds, 1.1 standard deviations in performance. So yeah, pretty impressive improvements in performance acutely, especially with visual feedback as opposed to verbal feedback. And this improvement applied whether you were talking about lower body or upper body training, whether you were talking about verbal or visual feedback, although again, larger improvements in the lower body and larger improvements with visual feedback as opposed to verbal feedback. This applied whether you were talking about single sets or multiple sets, although improvements seemed a bit larger with single sets. But yeah, in general, feedback just seems to be quite effective at improving performance acutely within a session. So if you have the chance, having some feedback method within your sessions probably helps. Whether that's like a bar velocity tracker, where you have the screen set up to be able to see how fast you're able to move the bar, or whether that's even a training partner, where you get some verbal feedback on how you're performing, or, and this is a bit more speculative and tentative, but I find it pretty cool, it could be cool to see whether or not mirror use while lifting helps with acute performance and then chronic adaptations. I had a look at the methods of each study, and no study actually used mirrors because it's just not really something people have done, I guess. but it's super widely used in practice. Like, most people, not most people, but a substantial amount of people lift in front of the mirror and have a preference whether or not they lift in front of the mirror. I personally see it as potentially a form of feedback, and so it'd be interesting to see whether or not that also works for providing feedback and could lead to performance enhancements in a session and overall to improvements in muscle growth and strength over the long term.
Yeah, it was sorry. It was interesting when looking at the chronic effects of feedback that potentially watching videos of you lifting again and then providing more feedback and potentially cues. The authors noted that it could help with technical competency, as they put it, something that we often see anecdotally as well with a lot of powerlifters and Gen Pop clients that we work with. The idea of having video footage of your training and then going over it and sort of picking it apart is something that in our practice is relatively useful.
No, for sure, and that's really interesting. Moving on to the chronic effects, right? Like, acute performance is one thing, but we don't mostly care outside of like competition whether something improves performance acutely. Like, that could be relevant for powerlifters or for strongmen, etc. But we mostly care about whether or not it improves performance and improvements in your strength, muscle growth, etc. over a long term. Because something can have a positive effect on performance acutely, but not necessarily improve it long term, right? Like, for example, citrulline may or may not, well, it probably does increase performance a little bit, but whether or not that improved performance then leads to more hypertrophy is a bit more speculative. So in this case, they also looked at chronic outcomes, like specifically strength type outcomes, where they looked at velocities mostly with different weights, um, the speed or height of, for example, bench throws and that sort of stuff, mostly peak and mean velocities during a variety of exercises, which are essentially measures of strength as well. So what they found was that there was an improvement in strength as well when using feedback versus no feedback of about 0.63. So again, a moderate to large effect size in favor of feedback. When we're talking about chronic outcomes, we can distinguish between jump performance and sprint performance. In both cases, it seemed like feedback probably helps. Now, for jump performance, the 95% confidence interval, they'd cross the 0 line, which means it's technically not significant, but there was an effect size of 0.39 in favor of feedback. And for sprint performance, it was an effect size of 0.47. So in general, small to moderate improvements in favor of feedback versus no feedback for chronic improvements in jump performance and sprint performance compared to if you didn't get any feedback at all. So generally pretty favorable, and the effects are actually very notably consistent across a variety of things, right? Like whether we're talking about upper body, lower body, whether we're talking about verbal or visual feedback, whether we're talking about more so acute outcomes or chronic outcomes. And so it kind of makes sense, right? Like if you didn't see an improvement in performance acutely, but you then saw an improvement in adaptations, that would be a bit more of a red flag. But if it's a very consistent effect across both acute outcomes and chronic outcomes, that builds a very solid rationale for why and how it would improve your muscle growth or your strength adaptations or your sprinting and jumping performance over the long term.
So feedback good.
Basically, feedback good. Now, how this would translate to hypertrophy and like more pure strength type outcomes, like 1 rep max and what have you, is a bit less clear. My hunch is that it might matter a bit less for like 1 rep max compared to something like velocity or what have you. But I do think in general, feedback is likely a good thing. You could argue that the improved performance that you get comes at the cost or at the expense of additional fatigue, like whenever you're training harder, and that could be occurring by feedback. Like if someone gives you feedback, or if you get visual feedback on how you're doing, that might push you to train a bit harder. And if you train a bit harder, that also causes more fatigue. So there could be a double-edged sword effect wherein, yes, you perform better, yes, you may get slightly better improvements over a long term, but that comes at the expense of additional fatigue. So I would say generally, I would tend towards people using feedback in their training where possible, especially visual feedback rather than verbal feedback. but there is the potential for it to be more fatiguing than if you didn't get any feedback and just kind of trained, kind of the same as like music usage during training, or like caffeine usage before training, where it might improve your performance, but it might also increase arousal overall, or kind of hype, let's call it, and that can lead to more fatigue.
Or just take steroids, get this over and done with, and move on with your life. But in terms of practical applications, I think that if you're somebody who's serious about lifting and you're serious about maximizing performance and hypertrophy outcomes, watching yourself lift and rewatching some of your videos, looking at your technique and performance is probably useful. Now, in terms of having feedback after each repetition, that may not be practically the easiest thing to do because you'll need somebody there to provide you with feedback. But there's other ways that you could potentially do that via, would you say, what, a velocity tracker?
Yeah, I'd say the most straightforward way to get visual feedback between reps would be to have, this is something a lot of strength and conditioning coaches do, is to have like a gym aware or some sort of velocity tracker that then connects to a phone or to an iPad. And you can have like a rack mount where you place your phone or your iPad in front of you when you're squatting, when you're deadlifting, when you're benching, or what have you. And you can then see the velocity for each rep, and that can give you visual feedback between each rep. And generally, you do see that more frequent feedback, like between reps versus between sets, is a bit more effective from what I can tell from literature. So that would kind of be the ideal case scenario. And I think that's an under discussed component of velocity based training, where velocity based training works great as a prescription tool because it accounts for day to day fluctuations in fatigue and readiness to perform, and thus provides a more individualized tool, especially once you've established a load to velocity relationship. But equally, I think that the under discussed component is that as a tool, it allows you to get visual feedback between reps.
Yeah.
You don't really get that with much else.
Yeah. And you can see, for example, a nice not case study, obviously, but something that I see often on social media is Lane Norton when he does his heavy sets. He always looks at his velocity tracker after the set, and you can see how pumped he is after the set. But then he looks at the velocity tracker and he gets even more pumped via the feedback of the velocity tracker. So that could be something. Now, for would you say for the average person looking at getting bigger and stronger, would you say it would make sense for them to look into velocity tracking, or would they just be okay with I don't know, RPE feedback in their head, or even having their training partner tell them, "Yeah, looks good, is moving
Yeah.
good."
So I do think generally more external sources of feedback, like assessing or rating RPE in your head between reps, probably doesn't do very much. Um, but I think that the more external the source of feedback, generally the better. The two most practical examples I can think of, one is more internal but very practical. The other one is more external but a bit less practical. The first one would be using a mirror. Yes, you're still subject to how you see your own rep, as opposed to like visual feedback on, okay, that rep moved at that speed, or what have you. There's obviously limitations to, for example, velocity based feedback as well, where if you miss Google rep, that could psych you out. But in general, visual feedback is good. And with mirrors, yeah, there's the case of you can see reps differently based on your mood state and what have you. I think, like, if you feel less in general, you may see the rep in the mirror and be like, "Wow, that moves slowly." When you rewatch it a few days later on video, you're like, "Oh, it moved pretty well." So there is like some limitation to it, but I think most gyms have mirrors, and so I think it may be the case that training in front of a mirror could increase performance a little bit and could increase adaptations over a long term a little bit. This is a lot more speculative, but it's also very practical. So I think that if people want to try it out, when possible, train in front of a mirror and see if it helps. If nothing else, I find that it helps, especially with beginners, right? Like beginners often do it to check technique. So that can also be a good case use for it. Um,
It's a
and then
small
the
pet
second
peeve of
option,
mine
what?
when people deadlift in front of the mirror and say it's for me to assess my technique, and I'm like, "Are you really assessing much during a high effort deadlift from the front as well?" Where you,
Maybe I just want to see myself in it.
that's fine, that's fine, but
Yeah, indeed. No, biggest pet peeve of mine, unironically, is when people do dumbbell exercises like half a step away from the rack, such that you cannot get the dumbbells. You have to like physically get them out of the way to either put the dumbbells back on the rack or to get dumbbells. And so I don't make I don't make a big thing out of it, but like if someone's doing it, I will generally just go and re-rack it even if they're in the middle of a set, because like, bro, just take 2 steps back, please. You know, like people use the dumbbell rack. It's a busy gym. Why go do your exercise right there? There's space everywhere. Like
I
that
don't.
actually pisses me off way more than people not racking their weights in the right places.
Yeah, that I don't care about. I care about
Because
the
I can
people
find the
not
plates.
unloading their
You know?
bars.
No, I can find the plates. I don't mind. If I need the plates, I'll grab them from wherever they are. But if someone's actually just doing an exercise right in front of the dumbbell rack, like, cool. I was gonna take some dumbbells and put them back. Now I have to wait a minute for you to finish your shitty ass set. You feel me?
It's this kind of episode where we're both semi-venting
Indeed,
without directly venting. It's been a horrible UK summer, guys. Please bear with us.
indeed. And the second use case, so I mentioned obviously using a mirror, a slightly less practical option, but potentially more beneficial, would be having a training partner. So yeah, visual feedback is better than verbal feedback. Having a training partner can be helpful in terms of providing any feedback between reps. So higher frequency feedback is generally better than lower frequency feedback.
Yep.
So ideally between reps would be perfect, right? Um, so a training partner could tell you looked good or focus on this cue or what have you. A variety of feedback options are available. Alternatively, if you do use velocity based training, but you don't have like a mount you can use to see like the screen and get feedback, they can just tell you 1.1, 0.38, or what have you. And that at least provides you with some feedback that you could otherwise get. Um,
You just have to be cautious with the training partner selection. Shout out to my good friend Chris Citas, who is a very mellow guy. I remember getting hyped up and warmed up for a 280 kilo deadlift 1RM big PR attempt, and I do 260 as the last warm up. And obviously, as I'm approaching an all out 1RM attempt, things are not going to be flying off the ground. And I did the 260, and it was like RP 8 ish. And it felt good. I felt really good about it. And then I look at Chris, and Chris goes like, "Yeah, it was heavy." And but because I know myself and I know that, hey, this felt good, that didn't affect me. But you must be wary of your
Indeed,
training
the
partner,
naysayers, the haters, they said you couldn't do it. I
and
had a
vice
similar
versa, right?
story.
You get George Nash as your training partner. Shout out George
Road
Nash.
320.
You're there, dying under the bar, and he goes, "Yeah, you had 3 more there," and you're there actually dying under the bar after. While he's somewhere
Indeed.
else.
On the note of Chris being a poor training partner, I also know a Chris that was a poor training partner, where I was doing an AMRAP set of squats, like maybe 10 reps or something, and he and his friend thought it would be very funny if all of a sudden he was spotting me, right? If all of a sudden he breathed on my neck, like repeatedly, using his mouth to distract me, and it led to me becoming very angry in my AMRAP hype moment. So hey, maybe pick the right
Don't
training
do that.
partner. Indeed,
Yeah, don't joke when the other guy is squatting.
dying. Indeed. Hey, I think mirrors and training partners are probably the 2 most practical applications of this stuff. If you can use velocity-based training and get visual feedback between reps, even better. Um, how this impacts hypertrophy adaptations, a bit less clear, but like mechanistically, if something improves strength outcomes, power outcomes, acutely improves performance, like repetitions to failure type stuff, I don't see why it wouldn't improve or extrapolate or generalize to hypertrophy outcomes as well. Um, so yeah, I'd say whatever your goal is, you can probably try implementing this, and it will probably benefit you. I don't think it will harm you. So that's how I'd see it.
Yeah. And I also wanted to add that if you're listening to this podcast, you can probably afford to rent an expert training partner that has been specifically trained and potentially completed at least 2 degrees with a thesis on supervision resistance training to actually help you. So you're probably in the 8-figure club. That's monthly income after tax in quotation marks. Hashtag Switzerland, hashtag Barbados, or whatever. So yeah, just hire someone, hire the researchers themselves, except Dr. Schoenfeld, because we need somebody to lead the lab. Hire all of them.
Listen,
There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people obviously, if you're listening to the podcast, you're training 8 days a week, so you'll need another two people, or you get some of them to do double shifts. You have them there at your disposal, living in their own bungalows in your mansion slash you know city that you've bought and constructed yourself. And yeah, easy peasy.
Listen, bro, there's some issues with your claim here. Number one, hypertrophy researchers don't train hard, so they
That's true.
couldn't give you feedback on shit. You feel me? Number two, because you mentioned paying someone to give you feedback, there's this new thing going on in the fitness industry. I've only seen it over the past like few weeks, where two people that I've noticed have made the offer to, well, I've said to people publicly, hey, you should pay people just to train with them. They're not even qualified coaches or anything. Like they don't even really know much, but you should pay people to just train with them. So one of these people was Jordan Peters, who was like, someone asked him in a Q&A, hey, how should I spend my money if I want to get jacked?
If I
And he was
wanted to
like,
learn how to train hard, I think
no, I think it was how to get jacked.
I'll find it now. You can
Sure.
continue.
Um, and he said, well, I don't care how much you have to pay. It may be several hundreds of pounds or dollars per session, but you need to pay someone who is really fucking jacked to train with them, just to be in the same room as them, to get the experience of what it means to train fucking hard and to put on, and I quote, boatloads of muscle. Um,
Shall I
and
read
then
it out loud?
recently, sorry,
Shall I read it out loud? I found
hit
it.
me.
It's how to learn hard training. Pay to train with people for one-off sessions that train super hard. You get to witness firsthand how hard they push, and they help you too with form, etc. Even if they don't advertise that service, just DM them. It will probably cost you 200 to 300 pounds, so that's like close to $400 upper limit. No one decent is going to give up their session time for less, but it will be very worth it. Spend a year, 2 years flying all over doing that with people, and you will soon become an animal. You aren't going to understand the levels of this unless you see it firsthand over and over.
Babe, where did all the money go? We were saving for a house. Sorry, I spent 70 grand over a year just flying to random places and training with random bodybuilders just to see how they take sets like RP9. Oh, okay, no worries. We'll just get
No
a house in
worries.
2 years.
By the way, yeah, no,
I'm getting a divorce. So yeah, that's interesting take. And then recently, I saw a top powerlifter who shall not be named also offer. Hey,
that's an interesting take. That was nice with
indeed,
the poker face as well.
indeed. And then another top powerlifter recently who actually put up a story asking, "Hey guys, if I were to offer it, how much would you pay to be able to train with me?" And it's like, my
I'm
brother,
not sure who that is.
you're just someone. I'm not going to name them. Uh, I'm not. Hey, I'm not going to name them. However puzzled you look at me.
Oh,
Um, and like, bro, damn, I gave away the gender. Fuck. Uh, bro, no
wow.
one's going to. Why would someone pay just to be able to train with someone strong? Like, what are you getting out of it? You get me?
I get if they're a public figure, or I get
It's,
if you're,
it's just a bit
I get if
cringe, you know?
you're. It is like when you're a Gen Pop guy who wants to get bigger and stronger. I get like if you're a very high level power lifter and there's somebody actually offering not, oh, come and just train arms with me, but like, okay, look, every year I do like a week where you can fly in and we do like a sort of seminar train together, super exclusive thing, which nobody's offering as far as I'm concerned. That I get. Maybe if it's like properly structured and it's like, if I'm a power lifter and I get to train with the best in the world and I get some inside info or whatever, I wouldn't do it, but I see the appeal.
It's
Now,
funny though because you see some of these top athletes and they don't know shit about shit. You feel me? And like,
that's true as well.
why would I pay £300 for an hour just to be able to watch you be out of breath between sets? You fucking cunt.
Absolute sports scientist session today. But it's
Like,
it's true. Like, I mean, many top powerlifters, you see them train, and it's like, okay, a few heavy sets. They took them there, loaded the bar. There was some hype. The end. Same with bodybuilders. Like, if you go to a commercial gym and you see some of the quote unquote freaks, as in intensity of effort wise, that are training hard, that's mostly it. Unless you are training with
100%. People like glorifying and mystifying failure as if it's this magical thing people cannot approach unless they have been blessed by like James Hollingshead or some shit. Like, bro, it's not that hard to reach failure. Just load enough weight on the bar, do the reps, and when you can't do another rep, You've reached failure. Well done. It's not that difficult. Fucking untrained participants reach failure all the time in studies, and if you're the type of guy to deny that, then well, you know,
You
best of
have
luck to you,
achieved failure.
as Tom Platz would say. Indeed, very correct. Hey, you got all the long muscle length episodes. Now you've got the losing it episode where we lose
Freaks. We're losing it. And we're not even close to losing it. Just know, all you mofos out there, one, we're coming. More content, more YouTubes, more stuff. Two, we are a few. I am 2 burnout points away from actually replying to comments with just cope and seethe and just absolutely going wild and just yeah. No, in
it.
all
Hey,
seriousness though, we're professionals. You're not going to see us lose it. If you see us lose it, we need help. Please help us.
I will say the biggest change in my life over the past few months that has made the most positive impact is the ability to just say post physique in response to hateful comments and just watch them not reply. You know,
That is a good
hey,
response because
it's
now
ad
you can also
hominem.
say post physique, post watch collection, post income, post tax return, post car, and what else are we getting into lately? Post MF Doom vinyl collection. There
Indeed.
we go. Yeah,
Spotify Wrapped while you're at it.
thought so. All right.
Final note. Yes, our podcast is getting worse, but you could be getting a 5-hour aspartame podcast episode. So just count your blessings.
Hey, I respect the 5 hour blast. So
I respect it too.
So yeah, peace. That's it, guys. No, I think this was a fire episode. So you get the best of both worlds. You got the 15-minute segment of effect sizes and words that could mean anything, and then you got 30 minutes of fire jokes, inside jokes, and obscure references to things. So count your blessings times 2. We'll see you on the
That's
next
the
one.
episode.
Peace. Nice.
It's still recording.
Oh, it says stopping.